Mm-hmm.
There's about 3 things that I'm gonna try to change in the language in there.
Okay.
I've already talked to them. I don't think
No, I haven't heard from her.
We'll see.
If it is, it is.
I assumed she would have been here.
It is what it is.
But
I'm good, how about you?
Well, thank you.
I'm a little frazzled. I have not heard from any of the commissioners about impending absences.
I know Wright's not available.
Okay, so I think we'll hang out a bit. We don't have a quorum. Oh, we do. You're not the liaison, that's right. The mayor is a member. Yep, okay, great. I'm with you guys.
All right. Well, being we're right at 5:30, I'm going to call tonight's meeting to order. And Abby, do you want to take a roll call?
Commissioner Roberts.
Here.
Commissioner Ligness.
Present.
Commissioner Lorge.
Here.
I'll note for the record, Commissioners Grindal, Hoyt, and Wright are absent. President Erickson.
Present. And let's rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have an agenda before us. Does anyone would like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move we approve the agenda.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we have an agenda. All right, open forum. This is a time for anybody who would like to speak before this body, a chance to do that. See, we have one who would like to. Please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, my name is Susan Young. I'm at 9950 199th Street North in Forest Lake. So, yes, a resident. I have a couple of questions that as you go through your discussion of your loan program that I would like to hear your consideration of. On your parking eligibility, it's a little bit unclear. Eligible is additional parking and reconstruction, but ineligible is resurfacing, which can often look like if you're doing a mill and overlay reconstruction. So I would just like to better understand your definition. I'd also like to understand the definitions of Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Are those just the dollars, or are there specific projects that you're looking for, and what are your definitions of Tier 1 and 2, Tier 3? And if they're really sort of blended, then I'm not sure that complexity is needed. The way that you're going to be providing these loans, forgivable loans, is on a first-come, first-served basis. And so what I'd like to know is how are you going to publicize these? I know that Nanette's going to do a really good job of saying to chamber members, hey, this is available, but not every business who might be eligible or interested in this in the community is a chamber member. So since it is first come, first served, how do you make sure to publicize this widely so that all of our businesses have an opportunity to come in first? And finally, the forgivable loan, basically the conditions to be forgiven are you have to have completed the project and paid your contractors. And I am wondering if there shouldn't be an additional, you get your money as long as you're here a year, as the business is in place a year, because you have said it needs to be a locally owned business and not a national company. If someone were to say, okay, I'm going to do the loan and I'm going to get this particular thing done, and that's going to make me more marketable so that I can sell to a large multi-state gardening corporation, is that something that you are comfortable with? I'd like to see whether or not it's, there might be additional conditions so that if the city is investing in this company, that we know that they're going to be around for a while. And I'd also like to make sure that within 12 to 24 months that same company doesn't have any unpaid taxes, that they continue to have unpaid, that they continue to pay their taxes, that they not be in violation. So it's not just at the end of their construction period, but to make sure that they remain a valued member of the community. Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move on to our consent agenda and ask if anybody would like to make a motion or make a change to our consent agenda.
Motion to approve?
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And it approves. All right, regular agenda items, item 7A. And I see that we've got another commissioner coming in. Let's let them get seated and we'll get going. Hello, hello. All right, Abby, are you going to introduce us and walk us through the Commercial Improvement Incentive Program?
Sure will.
Awesome, thank you.
So in November, I presented to you draft commercial improvement incentive program parameters. As a reminder, this came before the EDA in staff pointing out that we do have an existing program of a 10% forgivable loan up to a maximum of $5,000, but the program really hasn't been utilized. When staff analyzed the program, we really found that it's choppy, overly burdensome, and kind of what we were asking of applicants, property owners, businesses to kind of go through to get $5,000 was a little cumbersome. And so I came to you and I said, hey, let's retool this a little. Are there other ways you wanted to change it? And at the time you said, let's expand this out to have 2 different funding categories to try to touch as many people as possible. Increasing the amount for small projects, also increasing the amount for larger projects. From that meeting, I had some conversations about parking, and parking was not contemplated in the program. So as you see in what's before you is the kind of 3-tier type of projects. It's in the packet
On your laptop.
on the laptop. So what you see are 3 what I called tiers, but you could call it program A, B, C. I mean, it was just 3 different funding mechanisms for different types of projects. So for the number 1 and the number 3, those were really any kind of projects. The number 2 was specific for parking. So that should, I think, help Susan's ask at least just about what is the difference for these. The only difference is there's one that's pulled apart specifically for parking improvements with some maximums in there. So before you tonight is essentially the consideration of the improvement program as you had directed me and as conversations had come up after the meeting. To address some of the concerns when it came to the parking improvement, generally, it was if there was going to be reconstruction, the idea would be just a typical resurfacing wouldn't be. I think I would consider a mill and overlay a reconstruction, even though I know it's not full reconstruction of a parking lot. I definitely can include better, if the EDA is favorable to that funding category, I think we can fine-tune those words a little bit. Additionally, when it comes to how we would market this, it is a first come, first serve, and Susan was right. Nanette is promoting it, not just to the chamber, but to any businesses in the community. We do actually have a trifold brochure that we do send out or give out throughout the community that has chamber information, city EDA information, and county EDA information that's provided to any business. Additionally, once the program is up and running in its new form, we would market it on our website and any sort of newsletters. There are some challenges with first come, first served programs in just there's only that much pool of money, and when it's gone, it's gone. We can look at things like dividing it up quarterly or twice a year applicant processes. Isn't something that I've explored quite yet, just frankly because we're a little understaffed at City Hall, and I just haven't had the ability to kind of think outside that box right now. When it comes to some of the conditions, things like businesses need to be here a year or continue to pay property tax. I'd have to consult with our legal on the clawback provisions of these funds. We've talked about clawback provisions with purchase agreements. Those are legal documents that we do enter into with applicants, and we record them against the deed on the property. These forgivable loans aren't going to be recorded against properties. They're just an application form and agreement between this body and them. They are housed at City Hall. It all goes away, or it gets archived when the whole project's been reimbursed. That would really take some discussion with our legal counsel on us taking it back after that kind of reimbursement or that refund of the forgivable loan. So I hope that helps answer at least some of the questions or the questions that Susan had, but I am here to chat with you folks about your favorability to the program as it's written. Really hoping that we can kind of get this finalized and start putting it out there. I do have 2, maybe 3 properties interested. 2 of them in the downtown area, 1 outside of the downtown area. So I think it's definitely, there's quite a bit of interest. So it's really just trying to get, because now they all know that we have the 10% program, but there's the 25 to 50 coming, and they don't really want to submit under the existing program parameters. So.
Kind of sounds like what we were going for, more interest.
Right, exactly.
Member Legness, I know you mentioned you had a couple questions. I'll pass it off to you if you're ready.
I do have so broadly speaking, I think it's well-written and a good policy changes. The items that I would suggest that should we decide to move forward, we modify as we go through here. On page 11, under ineligible properties, it states properties owned by multi-state chains, and I would like to modify that to businesses owned by multi-state chains. Multi-state chains, I believe that was the intent, not that we're holding property owners, but that we're not advocating to have fast food restaurant national chains
Yep.
eliminated versus LLCs that might have properties in Minnesota and Wisconsin. So that was the first one. And then on page 13, 4.1, it says the EDA will review and either conditionally approve or deny the application. And then the 1 says condition of approval shall be the loan shall not be dispersed unless the applicant remains eligible, completes the project, and it goes on. I would like to modify this from a shall be to shall include. So the way the language is written currently, it would mean that these are and only the conditions that we could put on, and I would like this body to have the authority to add appropriate conditions as we see fit, should we see them being necessary. And then also on page 13, just shortly below that, under indemnification, it says recipients must indemnify the city and EDA. I would like to modify the word recipients to applicants so that it includes both applicants and those that receive it. And they could fill out the indemnification clause right in the application. I would assume that would be relatively easy for staff to manage.
All right.
Those don't seem like good changes to me. I would back those.
The first, just a point of clarification, Eric, so on that on page 11, you want it to be businesses owned by the multi-state chains. Is that what you were saying in the second bullet?
Correct. Just modify the word properties to businesses.
And Commissioner Legness did bring this up to me before the meeting, and I do recall that direction being provided to staff to change it because it was kind of funky language before about maybe franchises or something. We wanted to allow local franchise owners, but yes, the intent was business, not necessarily the landowners. We definitely could write that it could be businesses and landowners, but we do run the risk then again of those local business owners, if they don't own the underlying land, could end up not being eligible if the landowner isn't eligible.
All right, any other questions or comments for Abby? Question, tier 1 versus tier 2, so both are designed to be smaller projects. One is, non-parking, the other parking. Could a business owner qualify for more than one tier? Or can they only do
I
one?
think definitely by separating out parking in this way, they could.
Okay.
But I think that would be up to this body. I hadn't actually thought of that necessarily, of could their project include some building facade and parking? They definitely could be tapping into a larger pool. I will say that I added the parking in as its own tier because those projects generally are can be fairly significantly sized. And having that kind of one-to-one share helps it incentivize people a lot more than that 25% in that funding category of us decreasing the percentage share when projects increase in size. Does that make sense? I know there's a number of parking lots throughout the community that some of you have brought up to me that need help, and I don't think that the intent of the program was for parking repair. I do think it was maybe more for buildings, beautification, but there is some argument to be made that parking lot repair definitely beautifies a property. And often we can all acknowledge, often those are overlooked or kind of last thought of things.
I guess I'll just make a comment related to Ms. Young's question around the loan requirement length of time. I guess I would hesitate to putting that sort of clawback language in for a couple of reasons. One being a business owner may be out of business in less than a year, and so we can create all kinds of caveats for this. At the end of the day, the goal, as I kind of think about this program, is to help increase the attractiveness of Forest Lake, our business district, kind of partner with those people who invest so much in our community. The dollars we're talking about, $5,000 to $10,000, isn't that much in the grand scheme of things. And so to put more burden and expense on staff and legal, and the possibility that we might have somebody with ill intent taking advantage of the program, I don't personally feel like it's necessary, but I'm open to other people's opinions.
I agree with that.
I would suggest that, should we take the language modifications that I suggested, the shall include would allow us to add such a clause if we desired, upon receiving an application, to say, payment will be made 6 months after completion and determination the business is still in existence. I mean, we could very easily add that in. I don't think we need it necessarily in the policy itself.
I've got a quick question. If we fund somebody like a parking lot, could they come back next year for something else on the exterior?
I did write it that there would be ineligible for a 12-month revolving period.
Oh,
So
I
if,
see.
like, this year in June, they were awarded, they would have to wait till July of next year. The idea, again, I heard from all of you, is that you wanted to spread this out. You want to touch as many properties as possible. I didn't want to necessarily, I don't want to say penalize, for 5 years or anything, but I thought a little bit of a gap. One of the people that have inquired about the program, or one of the businesses, has used it in the past. It was, I don't know, maybe 2017. It's been quite a number of years, maybe even 10 years. But it seemed to me that we should be encouraging people to use these funds, invest in the community, and if they're eligible again in a year and nobody else is there asking, like, why not? In my time here, we haven't used these funds. The best I can tell going back, I don't think we've maybe even used them since pre-COVID. So
That's what I was
So I think, letting people come back again next year, why not? If it's a whole new project and adds value to the property, and I think we can always review it too.
I'm
Right.
sorry if I missed it, but how were they communicated to the local businesses in the past to know that these funds are available?
We have done it through the chamber, we've done it through our website, the city with a capital C, who helps you in your marketing efforts, isn't the greatest at marketing. So I would say that a big part of that is probably just a lack of really.
Wondering if there was an awareness issue.
I don't think there was as much awareness. We are also trying to catch building permits before they come in. Definitely when a company might go through a site plan review process, or we know we're making changes, trying to get them aware of these beforehand, are just some strategies that I will be employing with my team, both on the planning and zoning side and building inspection side, is just being a little more proactive. Whereas kind of some of the disjointed nature of our departments before didn't, building inspections department didn't even know this program existed. So.
All right. Any further questions or discussion? Otherwise, I would be open to entertaining a motion, and maybe Eric, do you want to do that to incorporate your language?
I would be happy to do so. I will move the policy changes as recommended by staff, amending 3 specific items. Page 11, amending properties owned by to businesses owned by. Page 13, under 4.1, modifying shall be to shall include. And the third one, also on page 13, under indemnification, modifying recipients to applicants.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just wanted to make sure you got all that, Abby.
I just put as noted, and we'll make sure that we review the actual words. But yes, I do have all of that well-written and documented.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Regular agenda item B, 7B, 2026 budget recommendation.
All right, so on your dais before you, and I apologize I didn't get this out beforehand, is at least a starting point for talking about the 2026 budget update, or budget proposal. So it's spring every year, the city council asks departments and the EDA for its budget for inclusion into the budget considerations. Seems early, but this just is kind of the kickoff to the rest of the whole city council process for budget considerations. So included in the packet on your dais is the EDA's current work plan and its statuses, just to kind of remind you of some of the things we said we're still going to work on this year. I acknowledge that the EDA and the council have indicated that they would like to have greater conversation about work plan development and projects moving forward. And so this just kind of gets us what we said we'd do through this year, haven't done, know we need to do, but this is also probably going to amend through the second half of '25 for the subsequent following years. Included in this packet for you is just a note about the EDA's Fund 212. So this is a fund that your budget is in. If you spend your budget dollars, no big deal. If you don't spend your budget dollars, they're retained in the 212 fund. So you have a little bit of a fund balance even after your budgeted funds this year. The EDA's fund balance, so this is money that the EDA has that isn't money that we planned to use this year. It's just sitting there for projects that the EDA might like to engage in the future. It's about $256,000. Does that make sense to folks so far? So your budget this year was $203,989, and we've spent about a quarter of it. I can tell you that that's pretty much on par with where we were this time last year. We have a number of projects outstanding still, some contracted services that haven't submitted for their reimbursements yet. Some of those things will come in through the next month or two, and you'll see this kind of move quickly. Included in your mid-year reporting, though, are our operations. Those include just operating supplies, our investinforestlake.com website, seminars, training, dues, subscriptions, and legal expenses. While our operations are still in line overall, our legal expenses are higher than the projected budget this year, and that has directly related to the potential land sales of properties along Fenway, the 280 Broadway, and Headwaters 123. And so as the city continues and the EDA continue to market and potentially sell land, which I imagine we're going to have more conversations about the end of this year in 26, those legal expenses are going to be higher than anticipated. So I do recommend a small increase for the EDA in operations for legal expenses. Contracted services, we budgeted $7,500. That is what was approved, but the chamber did ask and the EDA did approve an agreement which would increase those services from $7,500 a year to $10,000 a year. So we do need to account for that increase in budgeting, or that increase of $2,500 for each year. Planning, predominantly the funds are helped to cover costs associated with the EDA's work plan administration. So currently right now we're working on the Southwest Forest Lake Infrastructure Phasing Project. Some of you might remember we received a grant to cover that, but that is a kind of a planning study for how we build the roadways and the infrastructure down in that southwest corner of the city to help spur some of the development through there. Also then, towards the, now through the end of the year, we'll be looking at that Headwaters 123 property a lot more in depth and using professional services there. Those funds aren't broke out. We have $22,500 that we said we're gonna use each year, and we try to capitalize on our grant program through the county to be able to help offset some of those things. I did include in your packet just some of the kind of regurgitated information. Last year, you had asked for information about capital projects and what the status was of some of the capital projects you've had helped plan for, including Broadway Avenue, the Veterans Memorial, shoreline enhancements, and boat launch relocation. I just provided quick updates. Most of these are all in the city's current budget for 2025 or in the capital improvement plan for the next 10 years. So I indicate that we probably don't need to increase our planning dollars for more project costs related to planning studies, because we really do leave that 22.5 as kind of it gives us the opportunity to flex that how we need to based on our work plan, if that makes sense. Staff is not recommending that you ask for additional dollars from the council for planning. Again, we do have a fund balance, and if we do want to exceed that 22.5, we can dip into those reserves if needed. And then program funds, that's that commercial incentive improvement program that you just modified this evening, that $50,000. Right now, I don't recommend that we just ask for more money. We haven't been using that money. We've been putting it in our fund balance. There's the opportunity to dip into our fund balance if we receive more applicants than the $50,000 this year. So in this report, and I recognize that I'm just providing it to you now, but really what this is really taking a look at the 2025 budget and the 2026 EDA draft proposed budget. You'll see on page 4, the last page of the staff report, currently the total right now that we know of is $90,000 because the wage information has not been provided by finance. Wage information is just based on a number of different factors, including cost of living adjustments, unions, insurance. That information just hasn't been plugged in yet into this. But for the operations, contracted services, planning, program funds, staff is recommending that the EDA consider a 4.5% increase to accommodate for the increase in contracted services and those operational costs, predominantly the legal fees needed to kind of help facilitate some of these land sales. So this is up for your discussion tonight. You don't have to make any decisions. The intent was to get you thinking and discussing this and helping provide some direction to me as we prepare the budget for the council. The council has asked their department heads to have budgets completed by the end of the month, but with the EDA, I know that we do have another meeting that we could use to finalize the budget if we're needed. So more than anything tonight, it's up for discussion, but if you're favorable to the increase of that 4.5 to operations and contracted services, and you're comfortable not having that wage information in, which we are not proposing any staffing changes, so there's no changes to it'd be customary increases in wages. Staff would recommend that if you're favorable and ready, that you'd move to submit the EDA's proposed budget to the city council. Any questions?
Questions for Abby?
Abby,
Yeah.
I should know this, but on these land sales, those dollars for those land sales, they go into the EDA's budget?
So that is something that I'm going to talk about at the council's next workshop. With the land sale that we did this year, thus far, the 280 Broadway, we did put it in the EDA's fund balance. I need to talk about that with the city council. I'd imagine this EDA's recommendation is to put it into the EDA's coffers. But ultimately, we need to talk with the council. Council transfers the land to the EDA, so technically it is EDA proceeds, but it is land that the city, the council, has been holding. So I think we need the direction from the council to see if all or a portion of that should remain within the EDA. To answer your question, the sale proceeds thus far have been going into the EDA while I've been here. The council may direct me to do otherwise, though.
So the reason I asked then is, with these additional costs based on land sales, that, why, if it's not gonna go into the EDA, then why is it being, legal being in charge to the EDA fund?
I agree, and I think the only reason is because I'm the one that's working through it, and then all of a sudden, But I think that is on my agenda to talk about with the council at their upcoming workshop. Because, all of a sudden we got a check for almost $70,000, and I thought, what do we do with this? We don't really have a policy quite yet, so.
I have a question, Abby.
Yeah.
And I may be wrong, and I'm trying to remember from some other document or something that I saw, but wasn't there a request for additional staffing so wages would be impacted? And I know you're saying finance hasn't provided anything, but.
Yeah, so wages were impacted this year because we're hiring that staff this year.
Okay.
So the 2025
So still
budget
anticipated for this.
accounted for that wage increase for that new staff. And the EDAs would only be covering a quarter of that staff person's time. The EDA pays for half my time, and then that would only account for a quarter of that secondary staff.
Okay.
Because we're not fully dedicated to you guys. Though I would love to be. If you could figure that out, that would be awesome. We could really do a lot of fun things.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Yep.
Any other questions for Abby? Any other discussion points? Is anybody interested in making a motion to adopt this, or do we want to table it till we know what the wage numbers are?
What do you?
I would love if you would adopt it. We're very, that one of the reasons with that 22.5 with the planning dollars, we've been flexible. We haven't been spending them all. It gives us the ability to kind of pivot when a new project comes up. Beyond that, the only change is, aside from what you see, that isn't like concrete, is that wage information. And so I think moving forward now gives me the opportunity to finalize and submit it. I can always bring this back to you in July, at least just as an FYI, this was what the final proposal would be. But the numbers for your program funds, projects, all of that would be exactly as you see it here.
Knowing that we don't have any staffing changes planned, and we don't, as a body, two of these gentlemen do, but we don't have the authority to change wages, benefits, actually impact that number. I'm quite comfortable approving this to go to council as is, knowing that the wage piece will be filled in, and that's ultimately their discretion anyhow.
Was that a motion?
I can. I'm looking to see if others agree or not. Because if people want to table it, I'm not opposed to that, but.
Right.
I'd rather see us approve it if somebody wants to make a motion.
Sure, I make a motion to go ahead and agree the proposed 2026 EDA draft budget.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Just to clarify, and maybe I missed this, what is the current fund balance right now?
256.
56.
What was that? Where did that go? It's at the very first paragraph of the second page, page 2. The EDA's fund balance is 256,
So
628.
without not having that staffing person, that fund balance probably is going to grow
That fund balance
considerably.
will probably increase this year.
I'm having a little bit of a hard time of a 4.5% increase when we have that fund balance that we know likely will increase regardless of these additional costs for land sales. So just to
It is
point
a
that out.
It is a great point that Commissioner Roberts brings up, is that you do have that fund balance to account for those changes in programming, in needs. It definitely is one of those things you can hold your budget exactly as it was this year. Just knowing, though, that we will likely have an increase in legal costs that would dip into that fund balance in the future. Legal and that operate contracted services.
I think one thing that maybe this board would like to know that, staff currently is recommending about an 18% increase in property taxes as it sits right now. So that's a hard number, and this council's trying to work to get that down. So anywhere there's ability to kind of help that would be good. So I'm just, if we want to look at this later and do something here, but I'll have that ability to adjust it. And ultimately, I guess that the council can do that, but I'd rather get it from the EDA itself.
What are you proposing? Would you change these figures then?
So I just do want to clarify, when I do indicate that 4.5% increase, that's an increase to operations, contracted services, planning, and program funds, not including the wages. So know that that number would come down when wages are put in, and the actual dollar change is like $4,500. I do see Commissioner Roberts' point, though. We haven't been using all of our program funds. We haven't been using all of our funds pretty consistently. And frankly, until we get some more staffing in the development department, my time and ability to keep kind of working on a lot of these things gets pulled away. And so it's unlikely that even in 26, we're going to use all of our dollars just because of the staffing constraints we have.
Yes?
I guess I have a question, and I apologize. I didn't have a lot of time to read this before the meeting.
No, I didn't release it before the meeting, and it really was intended to be a discussion. I am really comfortable bringing this back. I think the council, the staff and council will completely understand if the EDA doesn't have its budget ready till July.
And I'm hearing Member Roberts' concern, and I'm seeking clarity. So the numbers that are on the back for the proposed budget, I was reading those as expenditures, like our planned expenditures for next year, and so I'm very comfortable setting that as our planned expenditures. Is this also suggesting that that is planned revenue coming in out of city council coffers?
Yeah, that would be, your budget usually is from the tax levy renewed each year. So on that page 4, where you see the 203,989, that is tax levy dollars budgeted for 2025 to be used in 2025. Same would be then in 26.
So perhaps what I might suggest, and this might require this coming back in a future meeting, I'm very okay with this as our planned budget for our planned expenditures as an EDA, but perhaps we have a second column for revenue, and we maybe balance that out to be the same as
Yeah.
the 2025 numbers, and allow council to basically zero balance us on their records. Perhaps we can even take a negative number to help city council. I don't think our budget's gonna move that 18% a whole lot, but maybe we can be a small part of it, knowing that we're not gonna have as many expenditures this year, and we're gonna have fund balance to be able to
That makes
level
more sense
that
to
off.
me. much more clear to me, and it, you know, right, it's not a large amount, but it tells a better story of how we've been able to at least move things, you know, to help offset some of that.
I do have the question. That's great discussion. And this is presented to everyone. So there are a number of projects that are in our current budgets and our capital improvement plans that this body has wanted to see, specifically things like in the downtown area, landscape beautification, the median project. Do you want to discuss utilizing any of the fund balance to help offset some of those project costs? Or is it intended more to not increase, you know, there's twofold, right? Can you help the city by reducing some of their project costs for projects that definitely are of an EDA interest? Or is it really, hey, we still want to preserve as much of our fund balance as we can. We really just want to show the council that we're not increasing our costs. Does that make sense?
Yes, although I would be hesitant to, in this meeting, look at large-scale projects that would reduce fund balance significantly in the next budget cycle.
Sure.
I would, without question, want to look at that in advance of a meeting and really think about it.
Yep.
If it's standard operational stuff like what's written on here, I'm very comfortable saying, yes, these numbers are fine with me as kind of a guideline, knowing that legal stuff can change and be twice as much as this or half as much as this next year. But I'd rather those things come off to us.
They
one
would
at a
totally have
time.
to. I wouldn't have even, they will have to come back. I would not have proposed it without proposing that to the EDA, right? I think we do have two counselors on the EDA that can say, oh, that's actually, you know, we've got some projects. You guys said we want to do these projects. We're looking for money. Hey, EDA, do you want to chip some of your fund balance? And the council, we'd have to look to see if that's even an opportunity for those cost share and bring that back to you. But that gives me, if the EDA was like, well, we'd take a look, we'd maybe chip in a little, it gives me the opportunity then to go back to Public Works Finance Administration and say, okay, is there a way that we can help offset that a little? I don't know that there is. 250,000 that you're sitting on really isn't a lot in terms of some of these capital projects. But maybe there is something in there that we can say, oh, the EDA could cover something. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does.
So I'm going to ask another question. If
Yeah.
So on the page 2, you demonstrated approximately a quarter of planned budget has been spent. Was that through the end of last month or
I do believe it's through May. I would have to double check.
roughly through May? So
The number will increase. And I'll provide you with a little bit more update, but that Southwest infrastructure project has accrued quite a bit of costs this spring that probably haven't registered. Additionally, you're gonna have some savings from your salaries. Well, I can say that, but
So if we push this out in best estimate for what 2025 will end at, are we?
I can do that. I can do a projected. I can definitely provide you with the projected. I'm not the greatest at finance, but we can figure that out.
No, I think that's really helpful. Like, whenever I've done a budget, it's like you're always working against your latest estimate, right? How are you projecting for the year?
Yeah.
So then we know, like, hey, we might have another whatever. And I know these are smaller numbers compared to everything else, but it's like, if we have some to give back or move or whatever, that's
I think
what you shuffle around.
besides wages, your biggest expense is your program funds, which is our incentive program that have been dormant for years. So unless in the next 6 months that really catches fire, I mean, I would guess we'll have
Yeah, I mean,
within 20, 30,000 of fund balance.
the wages for the position that hasn't been filled, I think are probably for sure less than $50,000 for the entire year, maybe even 25. So, but yes, so I'm hearing a lot of, hey, great conversation, I should say, great conversation. I'm hearing a lot of, maybe we shouldn't move forward, and that is just fine. What I think I can do at least, and I don't need a motion for this, is to table this. Well, I guess you can motion to table if you want. But essentially, coming back to you, once we have the wage information, analyzing how we can budget this with a no tax levy increase, including some of that projected 2025 year-end stuff to see how it is we might be able to kind of keep 2026 low by using some of that fund balance. I see a lot of head shaking.
I would go a little further. So I could tell you, I would be comfortable actually, I would prefer that our budget, when we ultimately pass it, has two columns, one for planned expenditures and one for revenues. And on the revenue side, I would be comfortable reducing that by the amount, down to the amount of what we're projected to spend this year. So if we're projected to spend 50,000 under, I would be okay allowing council to give us 50,000 less, knowing that that's ending up in our budget this year and going to be in our fund balance.
My only concern is I have seen
I know that the long-term piece is
that
that
the
it sets a
council is not
precedent.
obligated in 27 to give you that money.
And
right.
they're not
The
either way.
tax levy
but-
back.
Yep.
Well, I guess I'd
I
just be
agree.
careful not to, I mean, we got to keep wages in there, so we got to think about if we're going to reduce by 50,000 on the revenue side, which line items we're going to pull that from.
And perhaps maybe then setting an extra line item on revenue of unspent 2025 revenue and have a negative offset so that it establishes that precedent is not built in.
I'm hearing exactly what you visually want to see, and we can provide that completely for future discussion in January, or January.
President,
July.
so that, knowing, that's really a challenge just on both in this body and on the council, is that it's great that staff were, we need to get these numbers sooner, but there's just so many unknowns. Here we are, June 1st, basically talking about this stuff. So if we can get more of a projected number of what the end of this year, it wouldn't be that much of a stretch with what's not spent, that fund balance is up north of 300,000 by the end of the year. And so,
Depending on our wages and whether or not that improvement program, you got to think the improvement program is a reimbursement program too. So the projects that we fund this year might not actually be reimbursed until 2026. So there's
and
some-
I don't know if the ability to, you look at some of these things, this Broadway Avenue, the Veterans Memorial, short, like, does this body know much about the median refresh in Broadway? Probably not.
Probably not,
Is there
no.
ability to use some EDA funds to do that? I've also talked to Administrator Stotts about potentially some welcome to Forest Lake or downtown and utilizing, we've been talking about monument signs in the city for 15, 20 years, but utilizing, in conversation with the county, utilizing Hardwood Creek trail bridges to have some of that signage there to keep that cost down so you don't have the expense of a big monument. And so, I don't know as a body if there's anything here on top of this or want to move some of this stuff forward in 26, that would also reflect on what we think our budget should be for that. A bigger picture than what we're talking about now, but I just want to put that.
I have a question. As far as the 4.5% increase, I worry that if we don't take that when we have the opportunity and we push off for another year, or maybe we do it for 2 years in a row, and all of a sudden things start to take off, and there's a lot of need for our funds, and we're behind, and instead of asking for 4.5, we start asking for 15 to make up the lost time. That almost looks, in my mind, that seems worse. We can always collect the money and then just hand it out, dole it out as needed for different projects and whatnot. I hate to not do anything because we just don't need it right now. I don't know, it's just an idea.
One thing I'll say just to Commissioner Roberts brings up is this idea about some of these other city projects. I definitely think some of this stuff is work plan update discussion. So even if the EDA submits this, the council approves the budget, we can always come back and amend the EDA's budget using those fund balance if we need, middle of 26. There's always the ability to dip into those reserves as we need. So I think what I'm hearing at least is you want more information, which I think is great and it's understandable. Some of that information is year-end projections, looking to see are there ways that the EDA's dollars and current fund balance and 26 budget can help keep the EDA level with 25 budget, potentially help with some other types of projects that might have been identified as the EDA, but in a nominal way that doesn't significantly reduce the fund balance, knowing that by the end of this year, before our budget's gonna be adopted, but that we're gonna have a work plan conversation, and we might want some of that fund balance for 26, 27, 28 projects. Does that high level encompass?
I think it does. We do have a motion that was seconded to move forward. Do
Was
we
there a
wanna-
second?
I
believe
did second it. I'll withdraw my second.
I guess I'm not sure if Robert's rules would need to.
So withdrawing my second, somebody else would have to either second it
Or it
or,
just
or
dies.
it just dies. Or she can withdraw the original motion as well.
I'll withdraw the original motion to adopt the 2026 proposed budget for the EDA committee.
All right. Do you need a motion to table it till our next meeting?
Yeah, sure. If you want to just say and then
table
change it.
for a future meeting when we have a little bit more detailed information as discussed.
There's a motion to table. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right.
All right.
On to discussion. Fenway needs assessment.
So I think the EDA may have discussed this in a closed session related to, or this may have come up in a closed session related to city, or EDA and city sale of the Fenway Airport Business Park. But I can say things a little bit more publicly now in that earlier this year, beginning of the year, Forest Lake Area School District, oh shoot. Sorry guys. My display settings are a little off. Forest Lake Area School District. This is just, you know how like you just get to know it and then they change it on you? I just got an updated system and.
It's a lovely view, though.
Isn't it? I wish I was there, but that's just a stock photo, folks. Well, we won't have a visual tonight. In beginning of this year, Forest Lake Area School District was donated 2 pieces of property that the city had sold to the private market a number of years ago. Earlier this year, new Administrator Stotts and I met with Forest Lake Area School District to talk about those parcels and their needs in the area. As many of you know, the area was kind of designed to be an industrial park, but it was developed with a lot of recreational uses. And so we've kind of got some competing uses in the area, and our meeting with the school district was really intended to talk about what do you guys hope to achieve with your vacant parcels, share what we hope to achieve with our vacant parcels, and start the discussion about maybe we need to do some planning together to make sure that we don't have conflicts with the land uses, because generally speaking, manufacturing and industrial and youth recreation sports don't really mix. School district was very favorable to kind of sitting down and working together, 2 organizations, on kind of what is everyone's needs here to see if we can't maximize the developable acreage in the area while also meeting the recreational needs in the area. They were very favorable. Bringing this to you tonight to, one, just introduce it to you publicly, the idea that the school district would like to work with us, and we believe that we need to probably put together some sort of a needs assessment between what the school district needs, what the city needs, the EDA need, and how we might be able to kind of design the rest of the vacant land in those areas to meet everyone's needs appropriately. And so I'm bringing this to you today to introduce it to you, to have you discuss whether or not the EDA wants to explore costs associated with this, and whether the EDA would be favorable to using some of the EDA dollars, some of those potentially unspent planning dollars that we have, in helping develop this kind of needs assessment for the remainder of that kind of Fenway Business Park, now partially recreational area. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
At this time, we haven't looked at costs. Frankly, it is one of those things, it's the mid-year project, right? We do have funds to use that because we were able to secure a grant this year for the Southwest infrastructure, so we will have some extra planning dollars. I didn't really move forward with even trying to figure out what this would, scoping the project out, figuring out what this would cost if the EDA wasn't favorable to it, because the rest of the community development and city council budget hasn't accounted for this in any way.
I've got a question. What would that involve? What does that look like? Would that involve hiring somebody outside to look at it like we did for downtown planning? Or working with a coalition of school and city?
I think we would probably have to hire a facilitator to help. I don't think that it would necessarily be somebody at the caliber of the downtown plan, but the idea would be that this outside person would kind of help just understand the needs of the school, opportunities and constraints associated with school district needs and city needs, and to maybe make recommendations for the maximum use of the vacant land there. The school district has indicated, now granted this hasn't gone to the board, it was Dr. Superintendent Massey and their facilities folks, they have indicated that at least on a staff level, same with city staff, we're interested in collaborating to the point of cross collaborative agreements that look at dual marketing, that we're kind of trying to almost master plan and market the sites. But in order to kind of do that, we really need to kind of see what are their needs, our needs. And I think a third party working with each of these organizations, a small subset of each of these organizations to develop that high level structure is how I would envision it. It's going to take some scoping on my part, obviously. There's a lot in my head. But again, I haven't spent much time on it. But yes, we would hire someone to kind of help at least facilitate those conversations.
So would the EDA pay for the total amount for that person?
I don't know that the EDA would pay the total amount. I'm just curious, at least at the moment, would you be interested in at least partnering on this? I would then need to go out and figure out what is that project scope? How much is this going to cost? Who could do that for us? And then what we'd do is probably come back to you, to the council, to the school, any other interested parties in the area and say, okay, how do we cooperatively get this done?
Go ahead.
I imagine that the staff has some potential ideas of what could potentially go there. I can't imagine building another school while they're closing one and just redrawn the lines is in the cards. So are we looking at potentially expanded athletic facilities because the ice rink is next door? Or are they potentially considering relocation of their maintenance or bus facilities or?
No, they would be looking, the school district's most immediate needs are recreational expansion and parking expansion. Their recreational expansion, they acknowledge they have, and parking, they have no capital budget for. And so they acknowledge that if they're going to do this, they're gonna have to work with their community partners. We have a number of parcels on that in that area that we believe, city staff believe, could accommodate their needs in a way that are never going to be able to accommodate some sort of tax-based revenue. And so it's really looking at how can we design that space to, I don't want to say separate the uses entirely, but maximize the vacant land for everybody's benefit. We have talked about, even I think it's come up here, Buffalo Wild Wings, right? Commissioner Hoyt, I don't think Buffalo Wild Wings would be interested, but the idea of how could we potentially market some of the land to complementary uses that are providing commercial private parking but that could be used by the public, including people that are there visiting, using the Hoxie Center. So those are the sorts of things that we really want to kind of vet through and see if we can figure out a plan that both groups can work towards, and then find somebody that can market that and make it go. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Very, very, very good. One other question, and I'm kind of going off memory, is it roughly half the land right in that spot is ours and half the land is theirs? Is that approximately?
When it's north of the hockey center, roughly land areas 50-50. We also have land area to the south of the hockey center. They do as well, actually. There's both there, but there's a little bit more public land south of the hockey center than they have public land. It's hard to say public land. It's
I
all
would-
public land.
So I would be quite comfortable going in like 50-50 with the school district and at any cost portions from the EDA perspective, if there's a piece in that, it seems quite reasonable to me to facilitate those discussions to benefit both parties.
I saw a lot of heads nodding that you're at least in support of me moving forward to figuring out what those costs are going to be, scoping out that project some, figuring out those costs.
Go ahead.
Have you heard back anything from GON? They have that option and they have first right on any of that land. Any conversations there about what that's looked like so far?
Very nominal. GON has not signed the agreement, so I can't tell you whether or not they are marketing the property or not. I do know that there has been some conversations, not North Parcel, about continued kind of that light industrial office use, which I think we contemplated during the land sale. We said we really still wanted to maintain some tax base on that northern parcel, but I haven't had conversations most recently since I asked for an executed copy of the agreement.
Because he was interested in that parcel of land.
The north one of our triangle.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the area we're talking about. I was trying
Yes.
to envision it in my head too.
Yes.
So, okay. I'm in favor of having conversations. I love that collaborative work with the school district. Whatever the percentage is, I don't know yet. We
Yeah.
have to have discussions, so, but.
I guess my question is, I think you and Mr. Stotts probably invited the school district into a conversation. Moving this project forward, moving this collaboration forward, is that going to land on the city staff's shoulders, i.e. you, or is the school district carrying some water on it?
I think that it would probably fall on the city's shoulders, given the fact that we approached the school district with the premise that we would like to maximize the tax base revenue through here. The school district holds 2 parcels. Right now, all the parcels are tax-free, right? And we'd like to maximize those. And that does come at could come at a threat of loss to the school district, and I think we would probably want to take the lead to show our partners that we want to work together to achieve their goals and our goals. Ideally, that's where, though, back to Commissioner Lorge's question of who would kind of do this, we would have to help hire somebody to facilitate this. It would take some staff time kind of keeping track of that consultant or that agent for us. But at the moment, yes, it would probably be a city or an EDA lead. All those particulars would be worked out in some sort of agreement with the school district, though.
Is there any perceived preferred timeline for this project?
The school district is like, hey, let's get that done now, right? But we all know their organization doesn't move any bit quicker than ours. So we just don't move quick. We've got a lot of things. It'd be my hope that we would get something done this quarter, next quarter, but certainly before the end of the year. We're marketing land out there. They're sitting on land. They're not in any hurry. So I think we want to make sure that we do it in a timely fashion, but in a responsible way.
I would be open to having someone facilitate it, but a full-scale plan, between this board, the park commission, the council, school board, this is our community. I think if we can all come to the table and figure out how this would work best for all of us.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe someone facilitating that, but let us drive the plan.
100%. I don't intend this to be a facilitator based, like, they're drafting a plan, there's gonna have to be collaboration with with all organizations. And if that's a working committee of some sort, I'm not sure yet. I have to kind of put some thoughts onto paper and kind of scope it out to see who we'd even find to kind of do this for us. But yes, it's gotta be organization, goals, mission led to get what we'd want through here.
It's a bit, there's a great opportunity there that was generous donation. We have 2 sheets of ice in Forest Lake here. There should be at some point there'll be 5 sheets of ice probably, and more parking and all that. So this is a really important decision to make sure it's planned out thoughtfully, and as much input, flaw, whatever that we can get on this, I think the better.
I agree, and I think, to that point too, there were some businesses involved in that, naming rights and things like that, probably too early to say, but, if, depending on how the discussion goes, but there might be some of our other local businesses that, want to have naming rights and have, be represented there as a community member or something. Like we did, I know they're gone now, but, like that playground equipment place that used to be in Wyoming, and, that put playground equipment in all the elementary schools and things like that. I love that collaborative type, that's just a great community feel, so it'd be awesome to have something like that as part of the community. And there's gotta be other communities that have done this,
Yeah, it's this is just the sort of thing that a lot of communities do. Frankly, cities cannot do it all.
right.
And we have goals, the public sector cannot do it all, right? And we've got 2 public agencies here that own a lot of land that we're not getting any tax revenue on. And the benefit to all of us is, let's improve our rec facilities while also increasing our tax base. How do we do that here? And so I think, I'm hearing that, yeah, you're cool with me spending some time, at least getting some, scope of work, cost estimates, bringing that back to the EDA, and maybe trying to form some partnership to move forward on this. Awesome.
Abby?
Yeah.
When you're getting cost estimates, keep in mind that I think we'd really like to do the groundwork. The city, the planning council, what Blake was talking about, and work with the school district and have a lot of the groundwork done for them. So they're not gonna charge us a fortune to start from scratch.
I understand that, and I 100% agree, but I think that it's the ability of staff to help at least do things like document the conversations. Frankly, Jenny, we don't have the human bodies to do it. And so that's where I think I can scope this out in a way that their services are specifically plugged in, to hone in on skills of individuals and when to lean on the consultant, on a consultant. But our staff's ability to support a project like this is, we don't have the I don't have the capacity, Administrator Stotts doesn't either.
I'm just kind of cautious because we spend a lot of money on planners. And
You do.
if we don't have money, and the city doesn't have money, let the citizens in the school do a lot of the groundwork so that whoever this planner is going to be gifted with questions, answers, all kinds of considerations, and then they have to figure it all out. So when you say documented, are you talking about documented meetings with the city, with the schools right off the bat, or we can't have meetings without documentation?
But I think, if I could, we're really looking for a facilitator, right?
Yeah.
Versus, not so much like the downtown plan, is the way I've understood Abby. I don't know if that's,
Capture the conversations, make sure
So
all the
you're
questions
not talking
are.
about like a civil planner or?
No, there would not be I would not envision a physical plan from this, but rather more, what are some of the land uses, the needs, the opportunities? There may be a sketch, maybe, associated with it, but it's facilitating the roundtable conversations of what would be acceptable, what wouldn't be acceptable. A really good example right now is like the school district said, if there's gonna be a parking lot next door, we don't want drinking in it. right? They don't want drinking on their property. Okay, well, how do we keep that goal, but also potentially put a Buffalo Wild Wings where we could tailgate? You know, I mean, some of those conversations, those are local conversations. It's just the ability for staff to facilitate a project of that nature. I understand we spend a lot of money on planners, but right now you are only spending your money on me. And this is the kind of long-range planning that you have in a lot bigger organizations that have more planning staff.
All right, anything else for Abby on this topic? All right, let's move into verbal updates.
I have two in the packet. One is the Southwest Forest Lake Infrastructure Phasing Plan. That plan is, I would say, not even yet in draft format. They've just almost finalized all their wetland delineation. They're getting approval from the state on the delineations. Then they'll start kind of looking at those couple routes to bring back some routes for city consideration and discussion. I believe at your next meeting, we'll have something more to start looking at and providing feedback. Next update on here, I had sent out an email before this had happened. I had heard from several of you regarding meeting changes. Starting in July, our meeting date will change to the first Monday of the month. Same time at 5:30. But this is really intended to give the EDA a little bit more time, because as I see many eyes right now, just looking up at the clock, like, are we getting close? Are we getting close? And are we gonna get a break before council? The intent was to give the EDA more time to be able to do some focused, you got a lot going on, right? And for us to get it done in the hour and 15 minutes before council. So the calendar is in there as your reminder. Your next meeting is Monday, July. Thank you. And then lastly, not on here, I do want to let you know, direction provided by this body and the city council was to kind of keep our conversations moving forward on the sale of Headwaters 123 to a single user. And if not, then to move forward with kind of looking at scoping out that project or that parcel for multiple users. The single user has withdrawn in negotiations, so we'll start looking at kind of scoping out the planning phase for Headwaters 123 development as well. So keeping you all posted on that. Do you have any questions for me of anything that's going on?
Oh, thank you. Nanette, Forest Lake Chamber.
Thank you for that. I'm going to just give you, it seems like it's been a really long time since, okay, good, because I feel like it's
been 2 months. We had 2 months off.
all right. So back in April, I just wanted to let this body know that our members, as well as our Forest Lake area schools, the high school educators, did gather together. We had a mixer at the schools, and that was hosted by Career Launch. Very effective. There were school board members, and it was just amazing to see the kinds of things that are going on within our school system as far as the career programs that they do have. So that was well received by the business community that was in attendance. We also recently came alongside the VFW, Forest Lake VFW, and the American Legion, as well as city staff, on the Memorial Day celebration. And so that was just that was actually propelled by Kyle with Parks and Rec, and we just wanted to get the word out and do more, help them to have more publicity, and I think it was well received. I believe there was pretty close to 200 people at the park that day. We also had the opportunity, we were invited by the U.S. Chamber to host our U.S. Congressman Pete Stauber, and so we did do that in the month of May and brought together a small panel of business professionals who were able to, it was a roundtable conversation around the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, and so again, it's something that was very effective. Currently, we are hosting again at the Arts in the Park along with the City of Forest Lake, so that's been fun. We're looking for our second week tomorrow. And then moving forward, a couple of things I just want to get on your radar. we've been asked to kind of do things a little bit differently, just kind of propelled by that conversation with Pete Stauber, and Jenny will love this because you always ask me for updates, and so we've kind of done for the month of June, our member meeting will be a little bit different and a little leveled up, where we'll be bringing in our schools. Actually, Mayor Roberts will be giving us an update, as well as bringing together a panel of large employers. And so our member meeting will be open to all guests. It's free to attend. And of course, this body is welcome and encouraged to join us as well. So that'll be on June 26th from 7:30 to 9. And it's going to be at the Forest Lake Area School, the high school media center. And then, of course, moving on from that, we have our Lake Fest Street Dance coming up on July 19th. So just continuing to make progress on that, as well as our annual golf event, which is for the Chamber. That's our largest fundraising event of the year, and that's on Monday, July 28th. Again, if you're a golfer, we can see if we can find you a team or talk to Leif. And then we also welcome all of our new teachers to the area, all the new educators, through our Business Education Day, and that is in August on the 21st. So summer is not a quiet time at the Chamber. So is there any questions on any of that?
All right, thank you.
That's it.
Any other updates from this body? With no other business before us, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we're adjourned.
Who does the website? Here. The Arts and Parkland has been long, that file. Okay, what, it's, you mentioned it last week, and I forgot to send you a message. It's a brokered link. Which is on the website. I noticed last week when it's an, so I was like, oh, cute, I like it.
Well,
It looks cute, it looks okay. Thank you. So I just went.
Oh my gosh.
Went to our.
It's gonna explode one of these
Or
days,
not, excuse
Chris.
me, I went to the Parks and Rec. From the main.
I was saving,
website.
do you know that with Chesapeake Creek, I was saving on it from you guys?
Parks and Rec. Okay. And then Arts in the Park. And,
good evening.
yeah, yeah. Okay, thanks.
So why don't we pick it? You know what I should do is look to see in your model. Where are you kind of on? Narrow it down that way. What, there's some help us fix stuff. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. From probably.
Good. Right, exactly, exactly.
Let's look to see if there's a week that's better in your packet. You know, that kind of stuff.
Not the photos. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
I think so. So I think I got that, I'll double check it. Blake is back. This one, doesn't matter that I'm not in front of a notary.
What's it?
I don't have to be in front of a notary to sign this.
No, you don't, John will sign. Jolene is a notary, aren't you?
Yes, sir, ma'am.
Yeah, I just signed it.
So,
Got your paper clips back?
okay, I will take those.
Kevin's here, right? Yeah.
Oh, she is, okay, all right, I'll leave nothing there, okay?
No, don't worry about it.
I've seen it happen in this organization. But I don't know where it went. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I don't know if, because now that it's there, if it, because I started it at 5. Is nobody else here with us? I'm gonna go shove food in my face.
I'm glad I didn't walk all the way in.
Hey, Kevin, how are you?
I'm here and going, God, am I that late?
Take it easy, buddy.
Yeah, good seeing you.
They've been seeing this meeting ahead of us for a long time. Wonder if Eric wants his notes. Yeah, I'll ask him.
I missed it. Back for more punishment, huh? That's the plan.
So I think what I'm gonna do is I'll just, I think I'll
Hi,
do
Team
this,
Finance.
do the moment of silence, and then can I just say, then mention as part of the end that this,
Yeah.
oh, perfect, yeah.
No, what's up?
No, perfect, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Plugging away.
Someone they're getting ready to saw.
Yeah, tomorrow morning.
You guys have a good trip?
This one and the other one tomorrow, so. Awesome. Rain a little bit. I got kids good. Rain a little bit. 5 today and another 2 tomorrow and another Wednesday, so no one will be able to post that.
Feel good.
I just need to finally get some stuff done. Enough people just to get the bare minimum done for a little while and see what happens.
All right,
Yeah. do with the ditch mowing, so that's, they're gonna, they're.
How's Mr. Larson?
Tomorrow.
Good, sir. How are you today?
A week ago, they're switching the tractor over to ditch
Want
mowing.
to get some lunch after I seen you earlier?
I think it'll be hooked up, so I think we'll, ditch mowing's in spring and fall, or summer and fall. I think we'll add another one in there, because it'll be hooked up, so you should.
Hard to get stuff done.
But just rough mowing out of it, it's, if we wanted to mow more, we'd have to do something.
Eyeball. Yeah, yeah, lots of books and all kinds of stuff. So,
I definitely looked at this once we kinda cleaned it up and just.
I mean, normally I appreciate that stuff because it's usually when
Would you ask me? Oh, the order? Yeah, I gotta look at that and make sure I do the math. It's probably not gonna be so much on the streets and park side, it's gonna be an adjustment on the utilities.
I don't know what Alan's name
Good, how are you?
is.
Did you read these all thoroughly?
I probably can do it right now.
Every word, every word.
Okay. And then we'll see how our budget goes,
Counting.
because maybe want more help.
Do you get my, can we, is next week good?
Yeah, so I sent an email back to you, asking about the 2 dates, one of them next week.
Yeah, that's really weird about
Streets and parks.
And so then I was like, well, maybe when I started the meeting, because I just had a new meeting, right? Okay.
But it'll be an issue at our workshop, they're doing like.
And I was just wondering because it, I don't know at all. Then I made myself a note because I think this happened last time too. And you gave me the very same. No, I know completely.
Yeah, the week after that, I'm out of
Then
town
as
all
it was
week,
happening
so.
today, I'm like, did that
We'll
actually
be free on the
happen?
18th.
Couldn't
So the
remember.
18th I'm in town, the 24th I'm out of town.
And then after that, so there was no meeting right here when I did that. So she must have set it up and she.
We had it on this year.
I know that.
We gotta go and help the missus out with a bunch of stuff.
Glad you can make it.
They're already asking for help. Meeting tomorrow.
I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna eat my peanut M&Ms, and I would appreciate if you wouldn't harass me.
You know, disabled people who eat M&Ms.
So I couldn't also use my display earlier because my, couldn't figure out my display
that,
settings in the EDA. I'm serious. We don't have HR for a little bit longer.
I know, that's what I'm getting out of it.
Becky. Yeah. Oh.
Do you want mine?
Someone can't work because his fingers are precious. You're welcome.
Yeah, the rock.
Have you shared recently
See, Blake,
from
are we
yours?
gonna go through this line by line?
I don't know what the.
Okay, well, so it's not
Well,
over there,
a
it's
small
under.
town, the graph that I should make submitted shows the inverse proportion from the size of town employed to 101.5. The smaller the town, man, the longer. In Rockford, when I was their engineer, that attorney would go through the developers meetings. Clause one is an introductory.
We did that.
Clause two really just tells us who the parties are that are close. Clause 27. 53 clauses.
I put that under 630.
It was on the ED before, so.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, somebody nominating me president.
I gave him some peanut butter. He was excited about that. A little too excited, so I don't think I can give him peanut butter.
Hey, can we test this?
Yeah.
What am I doing? Registers it.
Right. Sure. Back in town, see if we-
Show only one.
start with 4. Took a few minutes to.
Yeah, we did a lot of, so we, I was a city engineer there, probably starting in 2004 or 5. Right in the heart of it.
Thanks, Julie.
Nada?
No, I got it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I owned a house over there too. Yeah, yeah, that was a big one.
So do I have
It
stuff
sat
on
for a
there?
while after, you know, then they.
Yeah,
I
you do.
I know, I'm like, oh, scared.
1031 did full property down in You see it now, it's unbelievable now, there's so, things are falling away. They haven't gone, everything until they eat.
They built a house right where we wanted to live.
Oh,
Yep, I remember.
that's fine. We can move. Are you gonna just sit back? You gonna sit here? Ignore it.
Two attorneys and 1 engineer. We're down 2 attorneys and 1 engineer.
All right, with it being right at 7 o'clock, call the meeting to order. Jolene, can you take roll call?
Council members Erickson,
Present.
Larson,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
Councilmember Valento is absent, and Mayor Roberts.
Here. If you're able, please stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, I'm looking for a motion to approve this evening's agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We've got our agenda. Item number 5, awards, recognitions, and presentations. Just want to mention first, before we get to the first item, there's Councilmember Valento had a baby boy back on June 2nd. So on behalf of the council and city, congratulate her and Luke on that. And so she will be absent from a couple meetings here this month, but going to be keeping track of her emails and watching meetings. So if you still have a reason to reach out to her, she's more than willing to take those. Next item. Some of you may be aware that Pat Silovich, the commander of the American Legion, had passed away last week. So tonight, the Forest Lake City Council pauses to recognize and honor the life and legacy of Pat Silovich, commander of the Forest Lake American Legion. Pat was a respected veteran who served as an Air Force traffic control officer. He was a dedicated community leader and steadfast supporter for all those who served for our country. In his role as commander of the American Legion 225, Pat led with a quiet strength, deep compassion, and an unwavering commitment to honoring and supporting veterans and their families. As commander, Pat brought honor to the American Legion at Forest Lake through his unwavering commitment to veterans and their families, and the core values of freedom, patriotism, and unity. His leadership, compassion, and integrity made a lasting impact not just within the Legion, but across our city. Pat's impact reached far beyond the walls of the Legion. He was a constant presence at local events, parades, and ceremonies, always showing up for Forest Lake, always standing for those who served. He served our youth by always stepping up to volunteer for coaching football, basketball, and baseball. The City Council extends its heartfelt condolences to Pat's family, his fellow Legionnaires, and all who had the honor of knowing him. His contributions to our community will not be forgotten, and we are forever grateful for his life of service. We honor Pat Silovich with deep respect, lasting gratitude, and I, Blake Roberts, as mayor of Forest Lake, hereby declare Friday, June 13th, 2025, Commander Pat Silovich Day in the city of Forest Lake. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. All right, next item, open forum. This gives anyone an opportunity to come speak on any city issue. Please state your name and your address and limit it to 3 minutes or so. Susan Young.
Hi, my name is Susan Young, 9950 199th Street North in Forest Lake. I'd like to address the parking issue on North Shore Trail. Those of you, several of you are longstanding community members, know that parking and noise and stuff at that property as far back as Willow Brook have been issues forever and ever and ever, amen. The Planning Commission saw several iterations for different businesses of that property. And yes, the property, as stated in your packet, has not been completely in accordance with every portion of our zoning code and our plan. However, the Planning Commission worked very hard with the owners to let them know this is what is available on the property through the various owners. This is the parking that is available, and were assured at the last iteration that they understood the parking and that they were going to have boat access and snowmobile access that was going to be a significant part of their business plan. I have several issues with the city providing parking, partially funding. Those include one, as a parent, I try not to reward behavior that was outside my rules. And when a business is rewarded for having done something that was outside the rules and comes in on the very last day before consequences, that concerns me. I have serious concerns about, and I brought them to this council a year ago, about how does the council choose which businesses they will provide a monetary benefit to, whether it's a sale at lower than market rates of property, or if it is helping to pave an area on North Shore. How does the city decide who we help with dollars, taxpayer dollars, and who we don't? If that is going to be the policy of the council, I really would like for y'all to consider a rubric. How are we going to do that? Finally, that parking plan on that stretch of North Shore Trail, in my experience, is going to be a recipe for disaster. After a long, hard day, if I go someplace for an evening, I may not be at 110% when I back onto a busy street. The city is wonderfully going to be paving North Shore Trail. That will increase speeds. Unfortunately, we won't have to slow down for the potholes. That parking is going to be a huge issue from a safety perspective. And those of you will remember that we used to have trouble with people parking on the other side of the street in the homeowners' yards. If we have designated parking on one side of the street, it's going to encourage more folks to park in those, because they say, well, it's on that side of the street, we can certainly go on this side of the street. For many reasons, I need to be respectful of time. This is not a good idea. I am strongly not in favor of this. I'm hoping that you will reconsider the staff recommendation. You buy a business, you don't say, how can I ask the city to fix my business plan? And then finally, if the council decides that the fact that the Planning Commission said, yes, you may have a business here with restrictions, but they are still a non-conforming use, the Planning Commission has for a very long time said, as you come forward with something, if you are going to reduce the non-conformance of your non-conforming use, we'll work with you. I would have to talk to the Planning Commission and say, this is probably not a good idea for the future, knowing where the position of the council is. I don't want the Planning Commission to be in that sort of position in the future. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Roxanne Keller?
Hello, I'm Roxanne Kaler, and I live at 20277 345th Street, Taylor's Falls. I've been at the Arts in the Park for the last 5-6 years, and I've always been in this one spot that I've always been at. Well, since he got a new person that's running it now, he has really changed everything up, and he has put me in a spot that, by the gazebo, that I cannot sell my jewelry that I make. I do wire wrapping of natural stones, and to be able to talk to all my customers. So he tried moving me around to different places, and it's still not the right location. And the last one he had me put by this big old green box with the cement layer or whatever, and I can't put my canopy there and stuff to be able to work on it. I went there last Tuesday and I checked out how he set up everything. In my opinion, it's not the greatest. And so I did on my application request for my same spot as I always have. And so I didn't get it because he rearranged everything. So I've been on the conversation with him on the phone, everything, and he said that I would have to come to a council meeting to request my $200 back from my application. So that's why I'm here for that. So that's where it stands.
Okay, thank you. We can have some conversation after that, a little bit on that.
We could, I would encourage you not to address that issue tonight. I would just push that to the next meeting.
Okay, thanks. Jackie, KDV, is this or part of the, so, okay, all right. David Swan.
We're here to represent the Pizza Pub, and sorry I wasn't just brought into this last minute to stand in for Jerry, but we are requesting some additional parking along the boulevard on the North Shore Trail to accommodate the influx of customers during the busy season, during the summer months. He's already made, a lot of folks are already parking on the boulevard because of the restricted space that's available in the lot itself.
Okay, yeah, and we might have some questions as that comes up on the agenda. So. All right, I am looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second?
So I'll second the motion to approve the consent agenda, items 7A through P.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes. Our regular agenda item, first one, 2024 audit presentation acceptance. Jessica. Okay. Great. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me this evening. I'm going to be going over a summary of the results of our audit and also the 2024 operating results. Again, I'm Jackie Knowles with Bergen KDV. The main purpose of our audit is to provide our independent auditor's report. In this report, we state management's responsibility, which is for the numbers within the financial statements. And our responsibility as auditors is to express an opinion on those statements based on the results of our test work. This year, we're providing an unmodified or a clean opinion. It's the best that we can offer and the same that the city has been receiving. What that does is it provides assurance that the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects, the activity that occurred within 2024 and the financial position as of December 31st, 2024. We are also required to provide a report on Minnesota legal compliance. That's required by the Office of the State Auditor to test for compliance with certain state statutes applicable to Minnesota cities, and we did not have any findings there. And then finally, as a result of our test work, we did have one internal control finding. It is a repeat finding, the lack of segregation of accounting duties due to one person having the ability to handle multiple steps in a transaction process. So with that, we'll move on to some of the financial results for the year, and we'll start with a look at the general fund's budget. For 2024, the council approved a budget calling for almost $12.5 million in revenue, and expenditures were authorized at an equal amount, which created a balanced budget. Actual revenues came in at almost $13 million. That's a over budget variance of about $506,000. Expenditures came in at $11.94 million. That's an under budget variance of about $542,000. And total fund balance increased just over $1 million as a result of 2024 activity. Here's a graph that shows total fund balance over the last 5 years. So you can see that increase in 2024. In the unassigned portion of fund balance, that's the piece that's available for spending on any purpose. At the end of the year, that was $7,222,000, and that is an important number because that's the number that's addressed in the city's policy. And that number is equal to 54.7% of the 2025 budgeted expenditures, and that is in compliance with the city's policy to maintain an unassigned fund balance of 50% of the subsequent year's total budgeted expenditures in the general fund. When we look at revenues for the past 5 years, we do see some variances, and that is primarily due to the amount of intergovernmental revenues coming into the general fund, which have varied due to the timing of federal pandemic-related funding. In 2024, total revenues increased almost 10%, or about $1.1 million over the 2023 amount, due to an increase in tax revenues with an increase in the amount levied in the general fund. Intergovernmental revenues were also up about $200,000 with an increase in police training reimbursement grants, and then also the local government aid entitlement received by the city. When we look at the allocation of revenues over the last couple of years in these pie charts, just illustrates that as total revenues have increased, it has been spread evenly across the various sources. And here we have some more detail on that budget to actual results. And as I mentioned earlier, total revenues were over budget, about $500,000 in total. About $200,000 of that variance was in the other category due to conservative budgeting for interest earnings and the change in fair market value of the city's investments. Another $200,000 was in intergovernmental due to conservative budgeting for the police training aid and then the fire relief pension aid, which flows through to the Relief Association. And then finally, across licenses and permits and charges for services, together those came in over budget about $166,000, primarily due to conservative budgeting for building permits and plan check fees. Moving on to expenditures, in total, expenditures increased about $403,000 from 2023 to 2024, and the majority of that increase was in public safety, which is the largest general fund program. That increased about $329,000, or about 4.7%. And that was due to a number of different things. First of all, for the police department, cost of living and step increases, as well as a severance payout, fire wages also increased, and the state fire pension aid amount that flows through to the Relief Association increased, and then also building inspection consulting services were up. General government expenditures were up almost about a quarter of $1 million due to an increase in professional services, including personnel search and computer support services. And then partially offsetting those increases We see a decrease in capital outlay. That was $0 in 2024. All of the capital purchases were paid for out of different funds, including the capital equipment fund and the main capital improvement fund. Here we have some pie charts for expenditures as well, also illustrating very consistent spending allocations among the various programs or functions of the city over the last couple of years. And then budget to actual results for expenditures. Again, expenditures under budget, about $542,000, or about 4.3% in total. Some of the programs with larger variances: Public Works under budget about $240,000, primarily due to less snowfall than anticipated. Economic Development under budget across wages, legal fees, and other professional services. General Government was under budget, primarily due to staffing changes resulting in lower salaries and benefits than anticipated. And then one program that was over budget, Public Safety, over budget about $120,000, primarily due to building inspection consulting services coming in over budget. And we saw that on the revenue side too, with the building permits and the plan check fees revenues coming in more than budget too. And with that, we'll move on to the water fund. Operating revenues did decrease in 2024 about 5% due to less irrigation during the summer months, and that is in line with what we're seeing at other cities this year. Operating expenses were up about $87,000 across wages and depreciation expense taken on capital assets. This fund did report operating income of about $741,000 in 2024. And in the sewer fund, operating revenues were up about $219,000 with increases in rates and usage. Operating expenses were up a similar amount across wages, repairs and maintenance, depreciation expense, and sewage disposal fees, so kind of across the board. Operating income in this fund totaled about $655,000 in 2024. And my last graph takes a look at the city's tax capacity, levy, and rates over the last 5 years. So the city's total tax capacity has increased each of the last 5 years, with larger increases in 2023 and 2024 as market values have increased. The city's tax levy has increased at a very consistent rate, so we do see some variances in the tax capacity rate over the last 5 years because of the uneven increases in the total tax capacity. And I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor, if I could just have a couple of comments.
Yes.
And maybe Jackie could fill us in on a few of these things, or just expand on them a little bit. One of them, there was, I think in the revenue portion, you were looking at the increase in revenue, and you mentioned the value of our investments. And I think that's always a tricky one to understand, the mark-to-market aspect of this. I don't know if that changed a few years back. I can't remember if it's always been something that has been shown on audits, but I know it's proper accounting, they're doing their job correctly. I don't like it because it shows something that's won't be, in 99.9% of the cases, won't ever be a realized revenue or a realized loss in some years. And so this is where we have to show the actual value of the stocks we own, the mutual funds that we're invested in, even though we would never cash those, never is a strong term, but very, very rarely would we cash those out and actually take that gain or loss, because that's not what we're invested for. We're invested for the longer term, right? And so the audit needs to show that as a revenue, but it's not what I would call I'm probably not using the proper accounting terms, a realized revenue, right? It's not actually money, quote unquote, in the bank. Does that make sense? Am I characterizing that properly?
Yeah, so government entities are required to record investments at their fair market value. So there may be an unrealized gain, as we saw in 2024. Some years we see an unrealized loss, even though it is the city's intention to hold those to maturity.
Does that make sense? So you buy $1 million CD, call it, you intend to hold that through the life of it and then cash it out when you're done. There'll be a zero-sum gain except for the interest you made. And we're properly reporting the interest, not properly, we're always doing everything properly here, but the interest makes sense to see that coming in as revenue, right? But the gain in the value or the loss in the value, I try to ignore that. Do you know what that number off the top of your head was?
I don't off the top of my head, no.
So then, another thing to note was that, there was an increase, we were quote-unquote over budget on building inspections. Of course, there was an offset, as Jackie mentioned, in revenue. So again, one thing government audits are a little tricky to see sometimes is that we separately report revenues from expenditures. We don't always look at the net right on top of each other, so you have to kind of match those two up and see. So there's a reason we were over budget, and that's because we had more revenue, we just had more work in front of us, right? So, obviously, that expenditure might look a little different if we were fully staffed in that department as well. You wouldn't necessarily staff up, you might have some overtime and that kind of stuff, but it wouldn't be quite as extreme as we saw in this last go-around here. The water fund, if you could go there, Jackie, I think it's always interesting to see, as she mentioned it, we didn't sell as much water last year because people didn't use as much water because it was not as dry a year as it was before. And I always want to point out to people that you notice that the operating expenses didn't really go down even though we used a lot less water. And that's because the cost of a gallon of water by itself, the intrinsic cost of it is very, very little compared to what we sell it for. But that's because the majority of our costs are Dave's folks, right? Running around, checking hydrants, flushing hydrants, keeping the water system up and running, manning the water plants and all that kind of stuff. And that work does not really increase or decrease based on how much water we sell. We pump 1 million gallons, 10 million gallons, it's roughly the same amount of work to run that system. So even though we sell more or less, the work doesn't go up or down. So I know that sometimes people look at that operating income and go, "Jeepers, we're over budgeting here. We should overcharging. We should really dial that down." I assure you that this is reasonable because you win some and you lose some in the overall scheme of things. You look at a 10 or 20-year trend line and say, how are we doing? And the other thing I wanted to point out about the water, and then we can cross over into sewer as well, is that operating income is a bit of a misnomer because we don't have capital funds in the water and sewer like we do in the general fund that hide those ups and downs of big-time expenditures on infrastructure. And so we have to have an income to build our fund balance so that we can afford those larger projects. In the general fund, we don't want to as often, see that fund balance grow as much as we do here because we have a capital fund designated for those big expenditures. So we're not like quote unquote saving up for something in the general fund as often as we are here in the water and sewer funds. So those are my commentary. Anything come out of that for you?
Nope, nothing to add.
Thanks for pointing those items out, Mark. Any other questions?
It's just a follow-up question, Mark, on the water and sewer funds. Those operating incomes, are they in alignment with what we've budgeted then as we look to continue to invest in infrastructure?
Yeah, again, it's, could you really say we're, plus or minus 50,000 on where we should be? It's a little tougher to say because it is more of a long game. But yes, I think those are healthy operating incomes that can are in line with our capital fund.
Okay.
Our capital plan, I should say.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else? Anyone interested in making a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the 2024 audit presentation as presented.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Great. Thanks for your work, and also Jessica and Kim, thank you for your work on it as well.
Very good job.
8B, consulting contract classification and comprehensive study. Mark.
And Mr. Mayor and Council, I think you folks are aware that we've been talking about for quite some time, completing a classification and compensation study for our staff. It's been about a decade or so. It's about the right interval where we want to kind of recheck ourselves towards the market in regard to our wages and our how we classify our employees. So in general, what most governmental agencies do is they sort of score each job, give it a point value based on the sort of responsibilities of the job, the education and experience required for it, the technical nature of the job, the sort of the difficulties of that, and then weight all those jobs in terms of their score against each other and then against the market. And one of the reasons we do this is because of the Pay Equity Act here in Minnesota, which requires us to report in on that and make sure that we're paying jobs which are heavily trending towards one gender or another, making sure that those are paid equitably across those genders. The scoring of these jobs helps us kind of level that playing field and make sure that we're, when we're forced to compare apples to oranges, we can compare, on a different level. We're comparing fruit by the end of this thing, right? So it can be difficult comparing those items because they're not necessarily alike in exactly what they do. So this is again just our chance to recapture our classifications of our jobs and the compensation afforded to those and check those against the market and make sure that we're within where we want to be with the market. So the end result of this will be some recommendations, and I want to stress that those are just that, they're recommendations. There's nothing sort of binding about this. You don't have to follow any of the recommendations. I would certainly hope we will take a look at them and make our own decisions. But what we're going to be doing is taking those and then sort of looking at, okay, let's say overall we're 5% lower than the market. We'll have a question before us is, do we want to be in the middle of the market? Do we want to be, some cities might choose to be at the 60th percentile of the market. Some people might choose to be at the 40th percentile. Where maybe we choose a range. We want to be within this and that. So this is up to you. The report will give us that range and that feeling of where we're at, and then we'll make those decisions going forward in terms of how to implement this. There'll be a phased approach to this as well, since our contracts aren't all up at the same time. We have some union contracts that will be up at the end of 2025, and we'll want to make sure that we have this information in front of us as we negotiate those contracts and some council direction based on that. The other contracts we may choose to wait until those are expiring and then work this into the negotiation for the next contract. So there'll be an ability to phase it in so that if there is a major movement in one direction or other, we have an opportunity to phase that in, that it doesn't come as a shock to our budget or a shock to our employees. So beyond that, I just want to thank a newly formed labor management committee that we've formed with a cross-section of the folks employed here from the various unions and non-union positions. And we got together and we tasked that committee with reviewing 6 proposals out of the 13 that we received. And they came up with some scoring on those proposals, gave that recommendation to myself and Jolene, and we conferred and checked some references, called the project managers, did our due diligence, and came up with a recommendation to hire McGrath. So any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer.
Quick question, that Pay Equity Act, how often does that act require us to do this sort of work?
We're required to report in every 3 years. This particular type of report isn't quote-unquote required. Most cities, I will say, use a third party at some point. I would say it's customary. It's not, 10 years isn't a rule, I don't just say it's customary about every 10 years.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, I think as the job market gets more and more competitive, it's just good to have this, and it's money well spent so that we could be fair with our employees and we know where we stand with everyone else. So with that, is anyone willing to make a motion?
Make a motion to authorize the execution of a contract for the classification and compensation study with McGrath Human Resources Group at a cost of not to exceed $20,000.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 8C, 8241 North Shore Trail on-street parking. Abby.
Thank you. In 2007, the city of Forest Lake granted a conditional use permit and variance request for the expansion of existing non-conforming structure at 8241 North Shore Trail. Even though at the time the city council determined that this would bring the property into a more conforming status, I think arguably since the reconstruction of that site, there's been problems related to the neighborhood and parking in the area. I wasn't here, so I don't know that exactly, but I've heard that from many different people. In late 2003, Pizza Pub began operations utilizing that historic conditional use permit. And not immediately, but fairly soon after, we started receiving complaints about the on-street parking in the boulevard. When we did receive these and they came in through the zoning, our kind of planning zoning offices, according to the use permit and their variance approvals and the code, there's no zoning code violations. In essence, we had the general public parking along a shoulder. So there was kind of little we could do. We did post no parking signs. We said, hey, please don't do that. But we also were in the middle last year, through 24, of spinning up a new code enforcement program. So again, when complaints started coming in 2025, kind of came to the same conclusion that there really wasn't code violations related to the use of the property. However, this spring, the landowner did change the status of the boulevard by laying down some aggregate material that did trigger a number of city code violations. It did trigger the zoning code violations, but also stormwater, parking, some of those things. So we did provide notice to the landowner that there were violations of the code, and even though it was on the deadline date, the landowner did reach out to us to start discussing compliance. After the meeting internally, staff started to talk about what are some options through here that could be a potential consideration of the city to help reduce some of the public nuisance, public safety concerns in the area. Included in your packet were two designs that were developed by the city engineering department. I can pull them up. I only have the JPEG images that are in your staff report, so I'll kind of zoom in on them. But the first scenario is kind of officially, potentially, or is the current configuration of how people are kind of parking out on North Shore right now. Be 12 parking spaces at a cost of $31,000 that would essentially be able to mimic what's there, but potentially on an improved parking service. The other alternative that we just explored is whether or not we could get on-street, parallel parking in this area, and our engineering department was able to determine that we can get those spaces in, and that would be at a tune of $20,000. I'll come back to these. I just want to use the staff report for reference. So with this scenario, we've discussed the alternatives, we reached out to the landowner, asked them of their interest in rectifying the code violations, public safety concerns. The landowner did indicate they're interested in working with the city if the city is favorable to putting in improved parking adjacent to their property. and has asked if the city is favorable to this, the city would consider a 50-50 cost share. He further asked for the ability to assess his portion onto his taxes over a time period. So there's really a few things the council kind of needs to consider in a request of this nature. The first is whether or not the city council is interested in doing a change order request to the North Shore Trail roadway parking project, or roadway project. This would be the opportunity, if we wanted to pave parking along North Shore Trail in this location. Now it could be a very reasonable time to put that in, given the fact that the North Shore Trail project is occurring. If you're willing to entertain that change order request to add in on-street parking, you should discuss the landowner's request to pay for half those costs. So I do note in my staff report, while argument could be made that the on-street parking would be of a benefit to the private landowner, staff could argue that we have had public nuisance problems here for a long time. Now for the short history, the public's been parking in this area, and likely we're just spitting those parking problems elsewhere if we didn't consider this. Then if the council is favorable to an amendment to the North Shore Trail project, doesn't matter at least at the moment of who will be paying for it, but the preferred design of the on-street parking. I note in my staff report, the current angled parking presents a significant public safety concern. Vehicles backing out onto North Shore, as well as vehicles having to kind of edge out and around them on the driveways, is very concerning. Though we don't have records to indicate if there have been vehicular incidences, it doesn't sound like there have been. I did request a report with PD. I didn't get it in time before the meeting. It sounds like there's a lot of near misses. The other thing is, if that angled parking is installed, in order to get those vehicles off the fog line, that parking would have to be almost right up to the existing curb line of the parking lot. So kind of straddling over the private property. And that really presents a drainage issue through there, because we wouldn't be able to accommodate for the drainage for this new parking in that kind of buffer area. If we looked at the parallel parking, the vehicles could be well off the fog line, thereby helping increase kind of some of those sight lines coming out of the driveways. It could also accommodate for drainage in the area. And then lastly, if you're favorable to a change order, and if you can determine if there's a design, we do need to discuss ongoing maintenance obligations for the on-street parking in this area. It would become public parking, but staff would really encourage the council to consider an agreement with the private landowner for their at least wintertime maintenance. Our plow trucks have to go through there. They're gonna get the lane of travel, but they're not gonna get that parking area. And so they would have to turn around somewhere. Ideally, we don't want our vehicles, our infrastructure turning around in a private parking lot, but it's just gonna delay the snow removal services on North Shore. So generally speaking, staff's favorable to the city's consideration of this. It's not common for the city to consider adding on-street parking for private benefit, but there would be public benefits for the installation of this on-street parking in this area if it was privately maintained parallel parking. So my recommendation is to discuss this. If you're favorable, and that's an if, then there is a motion in there to authorize staff to do the things necessary for the council to formally approve the on-street parking in this area. Much of this would have to be brought back before you, agreements, change orders, those sorts of things. But my first and foremost recommendation is discuss this matter. Let's see where you're thinking about it. And you already saw on your Open forum sign-up list. David Swan is here, and he's accompanied by Aaron Raybar. They're both from Pizza Pub, if you have questions of them, or if you have questions of me. So,
Great, thank you. Council, any questions at this point?
Well, I got several. If we don't move forward with a change order request, and what's the intention? Would bring it back to turf?
yeah, the landowner would need to restore it back to turf.
So what would the probability be that the time, as soon as that sod's firmed up, that people won't be parking on it again?
That is, I mean, that is the risk that we do end up running, is that the issue would just be reoccurring and happen again. It really does come down to a parking enforcement matter through here. And so if the council would not be favorable to improving this for parking, then I think we need some good, clear direction about the enforcement of parking through this area.
So,
It was posted no parking before, so.
yeah. What's, with the parallel parking design, what's to stop people from angle parking anyway? Would there be curb and gutters so that it would be kind of pretty hard to angle park in there?
There would not be curb and gutter in the area. It would be probably striped and signed. They also would have to visibly park off of asphalt over that kind of asphalted line.
Okay. Mark, is there any, if we were to go forward with this, is there any watershed district things we need to be thinking about?
We believe we can stay underneath the threshold for watershed issues. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I would, just echo the idea that if it's restored to turf, whether it's restored to turf or it's made parallel, we need to clarify, if it's not already clear, that parking is not allowed, if it's turf, parking is not allowed in a diagonal direction if it's parallel striped. And just, we need to begin enforcement of that then. I don't think we can, it's not a great scenario, I think, as you're alluding to, that to go back to turf and continue to allow this laissez-faire. I'm not sure if there's a code violation or not, should we enforce? And I think we just need to be clear, there's signs that says no parking, we're not gonna allow parking.
Abby, what's the concern for future landowners, our concern on our part for future landowners? If the landowner is willing to take on the cleaning of the snow, how do we convey that then into the covenants or whatever, so that the next landowner knows it's on them to clean that out? and
We
doesn't
would
blow
record
backwards?
that against the property, so then future property owners, heirs, successors, signs, all of that would be responsible for that. It can't always be guaranteed that people, have a full title search, but that would be conveyed the minute we find that it's not being maintained.
Any other questions?
Concerned with public utilities and all that other stuff that lies underneath there, as far as parking on that, maintenance and things like that, I think is a concern.
Is there public utilities underneath that area that we're aware of?
I believe the utilities are on the north side of the road, towards Main and Sanitary Line. Their utilities going across the parking lot through there.
Okay.
Private utilities, I'm sure there's gas and power.
Okay, so would you like to add anything to this, Dave or Aaron? No.
No, like, I don't have, I think she said it pretty much, knowing that, we could, speaking from Jerry, I know that we'll be able to keep up with, like plowing the snow during the winter time and stuff like that.
Ma'am, excuse me, could you step up to the podium just so that we can get a clear record of what you're saying? Thank you so much.
No, I was just saying, when it comes to, the removal of like the snow and stuff like that, we as the company, the landowner, will take, do that for you guys in recognition of that.
Okay. And you're willing to do either I assume your first request would be the
Parallel
diagonal, and then,
Well, diagonal, but if we can come down to the parallel, we'll do the
Okay.
parallel too.
okay.
Yep.
Councilmember Miller.
Aaron, I have a
Yeah.
question for you, if you don't mind. Can you tell me, where do all the employees park currently?
In that area where the asphalt was put, or where the turf used to be, that's where employees park, but, or like in the, parking lot, they'll park too.
So how many employees do you have at any given time?
During the weekdays, we have, during the day, anywhere from like 3 to 4. Nighttime is like 6 to 10. And then when you get to the weekends, I mean, we have up to like 20 to 30 employees.
So that would potentially be 20 to 30
30
spots that
spots.
are being taken by your employees?
Yes, correct.
Is there any place else your employees can park besides in your parking lot?
No, that we haven't decided on anything like that or anything.
What made you decide to to put down the Class 5 rock in that area currently that doesn't allow for that?
I can't answer that one.
Was that your decision?
It was not my decision.
Was that,
It's the landowner's decision.
okay, so
Gary
the person who
McConnell.
owns the land and the
Yep.
building that you lease from?
Mhm.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to say two other things. I do really enjoy Pizza Pub and Pizza Prime over in Blaine. They're all really good, and the one in Forest Lake, so, and I think you own a number of them, so. But it definitely is a real issue there for parking.
Yep.
You know, the previous owner, Aqua, when they owned it, they used to have a shuttle service. And they would have people park over at the boat launch in the parking lot over there, and they would shuttle people back and forth. Have you considered something like that to alleviate some of your parking problems?
We have not.
Having some sort of maybe a valet service?
I mean, it's been talked about, but we haven't like put it into effect or anything like that.
During the week, do you find you have major issues with the parking, or mainly weekends?
Mainly like Thursday through Sunday.
Have you considered talking to any of the homeowners across the street or around the corner from there to see if you could pick up a piece of land from them, or some area from them that you could have maybe additional parking?
I have not.
Would you consider that?
I would.
Okay.
So I think first, a couple questions here. Well, actually, I have a question. Complaints continue, were they right when it first opened, there was more? When I drive by there, initially, there just seemed like there was just a lot more of an issue when I drive by there, even during a weekend. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of parking on the street, so has that complaint been about the same, or?
I'd say the complaints are generated from a frequent few, and those complaints are coming up just consistently when there may be issues. They've subsided in the last month or so, since they knew that we were kind of working through these conversations about exploring alternative options. I think there's been a number of residents that have stopped because they don't necessarily think their complaints are, isn't changing the circumstance in any way.
So we have a couple things here. First, I guess the first question is, are we interested in doing the change order at all? That would be our first question. And I don't know if there's a consensus at all, or thoughts?
I am, just from the standpoint that, I mean, it's a thriving local business, so we want to, I think as a city, support any way we can, within reason. Short of, police patrol being out there on the regular, I suspect that should we not do something to motivate people to move in a right, safer direction, we'll end up right back here where we've been. So my interest is in exploring that change order and in the favor of the parallel parking.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm not interested in exploring that option personally. I think we would be adding to a existing problem that's not ever going to get better unless they do something completely different. And that's why I mentioned maybe there's an option with talking to some of the landowners that are there. If the city was going to contribute to a business, I don't know if that's the right path to go down either in terms of funding some of their challenges. They knew what the challenges were when they got in there. But I would rather see the city spend money to help them build a safer strip of parking, maybe somewhere else, across the road or something, or down anywhere else other than right there. I think North Shore is such a terribly unsafe road to begin with, in my opinion. And just even when I saw those horizontal backing parking spots, I was like, there's gonna be an accident out here. Now, I don't know if there has been, but I would swear there's going to be, because when you're backing out, especially with cars on each side of you, you can't see either way, and it's just a terrible nightmare. Now, the parallel parking, I could see where that would be okay, but it's only 6 spots. I don't think that's helping with the problem. I think there's a lot of things they can do. They mentioned they have employees that park there. Employees could park somewhere else. They could work out something with their employees to park somewhere else. Maybe they go park over in the DNR lot. Or maybe we work out something and park elsewhere. That could free up 10 spots a night, 6 spots a night, especially on the weekends, 20 spots potentially. I know it's hard because you gotta have your employees, so I'm not trying to say it be mean. But I think personally, I think it's a real safety issue there. And I don't think we should, Ms. Young said it earlier, I don't think we should reward bad behavior. On planning, when we were on planning, I mean, this has been an issue for a long time, and we never allowed it in the past. We tried to always stay away from it, but that's just my thought.
So you're opposed regardless, cost share or not, you're opposed regardless? And design regardless?
I don't like the design, but I don't think it should be a cost share thing either, personally.
If I could, Councilmember Miller, if it was parallel parking and no city cost share, would that be something you would be amenable to?
Again, it isn't necessarily the cost share. I think there are times when we should cost share. It is more of a safety thing for me. I don't think 6 extra spots is gonna get them anything other than what we have now. Still a problem with parking on the street, in my opinion.
I'd have to agree with Councilmember Miller on that. And I think there's plenty of parking there at the time, and if they would utilize the parking within the lot also beforehand, I just don't think it's a good idea to have cars parked out there on the right of way. I'm a strong believer in that as well.
I mean, have we had like the engineers or anyone look at it? I mean, is there any way that parking lot can be redesigned?
There's just not space. I looked at that 12 ways to Sunday. It's maximized. It's maxed out there. I think there's even a variance to the parking lot setback. Abby, is that correct already, to allow for the parking lot to be as big as it is?
Yes, that we allowed the parking lot to be closer to the right-of-way to be able to accommodate kind of the 2 lanes on the 2 traffic adjacent to the roadway. I can pull up an aerial here.
While she's doing that, just a couple of comments. I appreciate the 2 council members' opposition. I do understand your position. I think while the 6 spots certainly won't solve the problem, I think it's a step in the right direction. I do think the safety concerns are real. There is no safe way to park along the road. I do think the parallel spots would be reasonably safe. I think the diagonal is a non-starter for me. I know Ryan, our city engineer as well, had some serious concerns with that, and our public safety folks as well. Chief Peterson was not favorable to that idea either. So I think a couple of things also is that I don't know that we want to have an arrangement where we're relying on the DNR lot as a backup either. I think that's something we haven't discussed with them, and not sure if that's
technically probably not a legal
probably
place
not allowed,
either.
right? Yeah, the DNR has the purpose for that lot, and it's not for pizza parking. I do think certainly you make valid points, Councilmember Miller, about the need for the landowner to look elsewhere to solve their problem and get creative with shuttle solutions or whatever like that. I think we should. I think the two things can be mutually exclusive. I think the city could construct this parking and request it. You know, I think what you're doing here is if you were to construct the 6 parallel spots, and, you know, we can talk funding later, whether you fund any of it or not, you could also then say, with this, we're going to become much more strict in enforcing parking rules, so you should make sure that you get that straightened out, because we're gonna be ticketing people who park along the road where it's zone no parking, and we're not gonna be, you know, lenient about that. So I think there's a yes and probability here. I think you can do this and also not reward bad behavior, so to speak. That you can get a little stricter with enforcement of parking to make sure that the parking that's done is done as safely as possible. One of the things that Ryan and I looked at with the parallel spots is that normally a parallel parking spot is 8 feet wide. And usually you end up with a 2-foot gutter pan as well. So you have a 10-foot from fog line to curb. In this case, we're not gonna have curb necessarily. But what we'd like to do is make that a little bit wider than the 8-foot minimum, say more like 12 feet, so that you have a bit of an area there to maneuver. It won't be, you'll still need to, someone coming eastbound will still have to, or southbound, whatever you want to think of it, would still need to maneuver around someone parking, but would have a little bit of wiggle room. So there is some of that buffer between fog line and the person actually parking. There is enough room there to accommodate that, so that we're not right up on the fog line with the parked cars, so that when you swing your door out, you're not into the fog line, right? If that makes any sense. So, again, appreciate both of your opinions and not trying to be argumentative in any way, shape, or form, but I think I see an opportunity to make the situation better and be in a very strong position to draw a line in the sand and say, this is it, we can't tolerate illegal parking.
Abby, could you go back to that greater view of the area? So is there street parking allowed on Inman and 224th?
That's what I was gonna ask. It's not posted or anything, is it?
On Inman?
Inman, yeah.
On Inman, it's no parking, and it's quite a ways up on 224th where
Right.
there's a no parking. So
Because
it's
such a
quite
slender
a,
street.
quite a distance to walk to the pub. from
Well, I was
that.
thinking the pizza pub needs to get a really cool golf cart, go pick up there.
So it's not posted no parking?
It's posted no parking.
Yeah, I would assume that is avoid the overflow from the
From the
the launch, yeah.
And it's my understanding that the previous, like the Aqua group, they did pursue private property for parking, and they found nothing in the area.
I think they were using some up off of 224th, which is now developed. There was an open field there that area is developed, and so they were using, my understanding, they were using that. So, so my thought on this is pretty similar to Mark's. I think, we've got kind of a bad situation here. We've got a major road project coming through there. It's the opportunity for the city to fix this and make it better than it is. It's not gonna be perfect. I would also advocate for them to continue to look for some of those off-site parking situations, especially on busy weekends, holiday weekends. I think doing the parallel is a much safer, and so I'm in favor of that. The cost share part, I'm indifferent at this point. I don't know, is that a decision you need tonight, preferably?
I mean, I think it's gonna help inform the decision of the owner.
Yeah.
How many parking spaces do you have in your lot, sir? 66. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, council members, and Mark, do we, on the north side of the road, how much is city easement or city owned property there?
Yeah, as you can see on the image that's on the screen, the black line would be the right-of-way line. So yeah, the one Abby's pointing to there.
Yep.
So I don't know if you're going down the direction of could we put any more parallel parking on that side or
No, I was thinking, could we move the road a little bit?
Sure.
If we're redoing the road, and now I'm starting to think, can we adjust the road slightly? Obviously, if these people are being, I guess, uncooperative, trying to help us solve a problem, we have the right to to do that, maybe we move the road a little bit that way and put more of a safe lane in there where those cars are gonna be parked and give us more room. Is that an option?
Ryan's not here, we can move the road, no problem.
Well,
I know, that was absolutely an option I considered, Councilmember. There are myriad complications with that, none the least of which is watershed rules about whether or not we're doing a reclaim project or a reconstruction project. And the minute we start looking at something as a reconstruction, in other words, we're moving a road, realigning it, we may end up triggering some rules there that will be cost prohibitive. I think what you're saying, I think what I was describing before at how far away this parallel is gonna be from the fog line is, you may end up, once it's drawn up or constructed, you may feel like, oh yeah, look at that, it is quite a ways off that fog line, because remember, we're gonna narrow these lanes a little bit, so we're gonna have the road itself all along will have a 4-foot shoulder already, right? And so if we can kind of tack an 8-foot lane on that 4-foot shoulder, and you've got that 4 feet of room to swing into a spot, I think it will be a little less frightening and unsafe as you might initially think. And, you know, as you're thinking about when you parallel park in a downtown area, it's awkward, right? You're in the middle of that lane, you better make sure that you put your blinker on before you stop, because the person behind you has to understand that you're gonna try to pull in there. Remember the speed limit here, I believe, is 35 miles an hour. So even though I know a lot of people have, expressed that anecdotally they see people drive a lot faster than that, it is the speed limit there. It's fairly low and akin to speed limits that you would normally see in a downtown area, normally 30 miles an hour, right? So it is similar to a downtown situation. The other point I would make about just, there's been some comment about, do we want to help a business? The idea of on-street parking in a business district, if we were talking about downtown or any sort of business district, we wouldn't talk about it in those terms of like, oh, we're helping a business, right? You think of it as in terms of helping the business district. This business happens to be on an island out there by itself, and in some regard, I feel like perhaps resistance to helping them is a bit punitive for them being by themselves as opposed to being part of another business district, right? And I don't mean that necessarily that we should finance this, but that we would oppose them paying for additional parking on our street. Feels like, would we oppose that in the downtown? If a couple of businesses got together and said, hey, we could use some more on-street parking here, we're willing to pay for that, would we oppose that in the downtown? Probably not, right? Yeah.
So if it was like downtown, we would have nice wide 4-foot or 6-foot shoulders where people can park, and so I wouldn't be opposed to that. I mean, if we were building this road and we were putting the nice wide shoulders on like we have on part of North Shore Trail up on the, more of the west side where there was parking, ample parking, I think that would be fine. That way you could park on both sides of the road if you wanted to, or you could have it on one side. And I think residents would like that too, because they have guests come over, they could park cars in front of their house out on the road, but we don't have that anywhere on this road. So I'm struggling with the fact that we'll just have it in this one spot. And that was one of the reasons why I think when we talked about redoing North Shore Trail, we talked about adding that lane along the road, whether it be for bike travel or whether it be for parking or what have you. I wouldn't be opposed to parallel, like I said, but I don't think 6 spots gives you much.
Dedicated to employee parking only.
And is there an option? I mean, it is a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit road, but could we put a stop sign before you get to Pizza Pub and a stop sign before you get to Pizza Pub from the other direction for safety?
Councilmember Miller, I get in and out of my car in front of Snap almost every morning, and I'll tell you that traffic's coming by all of 30, if not
Yeah,
more.
yeah, for sure.
But they move over for me, you know,
Sure.
and I'm not the only one, right? There's usually a half dozen cars
Yeah.
there. And so people aren't oblivious, you know, even in the dark. I mean, it's not gonna be pitch black out there. I don't think that road, while it's well-traveled, I mean, how often is it, you know, both cars coming at the same time that can't move over? You know, as Mark had alluded,
Yeah.
you know, we kind of narrow the lanes to create some bigger shoulders, and then we're gonna have another pretty significant parking space. So, I mean, they'll truly be, as I understand it, off the road. I guess personally, I wouldn't have any concern of getting out of my car, and my kids work out there. I would be
Yeah. Oh, no,
concerned about them getting out of the car there, you know.
Don't get me wrong, I love the restaurant, and I'm so thankful the business is here. I'm more concerned about safety than anything. And like I said, 6 cars is fine, but
So when I'm thinking about early on when it first opened, I don't think they were using that parking. And I did recall seeing cars parked on the side of the road all the time. We don't do anything here. It goes back to grass. We are stringent on parking. That's, even though it's just 6, that's 6 more cars that are gonna find parking somewhere else in a neighborhood that's gonna be upsetting to those neighbors. So it's almost like it's not perfect, but we're helping the situation. We've got this project coming through. It's substantially not a lot of dollars. It just makes sense to do this and do it now, and not make it go back to where it was, and we have more of a parking issue. This helps the parking issue. I understand it's just 6. Again, you could suggest to try to find other properties around where they could do some type of a valet or a shuttle type system on those bigger weekends, but it just seems like it's the right time, and we're actually creating a better, more safe environment than what's currently there. Any other thoughts? So with that, then, I would, and I don't know about the funding part, I don't know, but I'd make a motion to move to authorize staff to do all the things necessary to the city council to formally approve on-street parking adjacent to 8241 North Shore Trail.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
the motion is, could you repeat the motion, please, Mr. Mayor?
As it's recommended on the staff report. So it's to authorize staff to do all things necessary to formally approve on-street parking adjacent to 8241 North Shore Trail. So the part of the cost share thing, maybe that's, we had a discussion at EDA level today about helping with parking lots and different things. Maybe that's a question that's kicked back to the EDA to discuss if they want to be part of a cost share situation in this. But as far as council level, I think this is the right time to move forward with this project.
So are you saying that if we approve the motion, the parking's gonna be there, or are they coming back to us again for final approval?
Who's they?
The staff.
The cost share, an amendment to the North Shore Trail would need, a plan change would need to come back before you, and any further agreements for cost share.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, there's a motion on the table. We need a second before further discussion.
I seconded.
You did, okay.
Sorry,
thank you.
we're in discussion, I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
I again, indifferent on the, at this point, on the cost share piece. Is there ability to kick that to the EDA to make that, to be part of that?
I would certainly think so, but I think to Councilmember Miller's question, kind of this motion, what it does is direct staff, if I'm understanding it correctly, to actually build out the change order.
Yeah, we
Correct.
would be moving forward
And
with
that's what
building out the change order plans
That would come back before us for
that would come back
approval.
before you for approval. Ideally, in this time period, I'd also reach back out to the landowner, letting them know this conversation and the conversations we've just had regarding things like cost share. The landowner's willing to pay for them, in its entirety, we'd be bringing back for you all in one kind of nice little package, that change order, an agreement with them for the payment, and then some sort of agreement for the long-term maintenance, and then all the documents that bind that to the property. maybe not all at once, but we try to get everything scooped up together for you to formally consider. But your motion tonight would be giving us the go-ahead to get it all
Put together.
as close to done as possible.
And I'm sorry, one more discussion point. Is that regarding one sketch or the other, or either one
In the parallel form.
in the parallel form? Okay.
I think that should probably take an amended motion, would be my recommendation, just to state that, to clarify that for
Okay,
the record.
so I'll amend the motion to move to authorize staff to do all things necessary for the city council to formally approve on-street parking adjacent to 8241 North Shore Trail in a parallel plan.
And I'll second the friendly amendment.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right, we are done the regular agenda, so we'll go on to staff updates. Jolene,
No updates this evening.
Abby?
I just have a couple. Mayor Roberts did mention that the EDA met tonight. They did make modifications to their commercial improvement incentive program, which it's currently a 10% reimbursable program up to $5,000. Their new program would allow for reimbursements of up to 25 to 50% of a project's cost, up to $10,000, depending on the size of the project. So I think that that's definitely something that is going to be very beneficial for our business community. And then also wanted to provide an update that earlier this year we were in closed session with the EDA and the council talking about favorable land sale terms related to Headwaters 123. The council and EDA were advised that we had a single user that was interested in purchasing Headwaters 123, but they have since pulled out of that negotiation. So we will be moving forward with council EDA, kind of, as we discussed and directed, to kind of start exploring Headwaters 123 for multiple users. So we'll be working on something to kind of bring back formally to the EDA and the council. We do also have Planning Commission on Wednesday night this week.
Great, thank you. Dave, you have anything tonight?
A bunch of stuff.
Perfect.
Broadway Avenue, they just finished diamond grading all the lanes, so they should be painting that in the next night or two, and then that should be back, open up the traffic. So within the next few days, that should be back open, 2 lanes both directions. The local street project, they're right now working in Water's Edge, the Itasca Avenue area. Getting close to being put on the first lift there, and then they will be working on North Shore Trail. They haven't already started, they just start milling phase 1, starting from 97, working to the north or to the west, whatever way you want to look from there. 97, I'm sure everybody's heard from that. We've been doing a lot of things. MnDOT's been pretty gracious of adding additional signs. City of Columbus, I'd like to thank them as well too. Today we calcium chlorided the gravel road loop on Fenway and Elmcrest and 190th, and they volunteered to do all of our city streets too with the rubber tire roller, so they helped out with that. MnDOT sprayed it, and Public Works and Forest Lake and Columbus kind of tag teamed that and got that done. There's a bunch of people that are trying to find cut-throughs. MnDOT's putting up a bunch of signage. I went and talked to a police officer today. There was a type 3 barricade that said road closed at 3 traffic with a squad car there, and he had 15 people in the matter of a half an hour that went past him, hit the dead end and came back. So I know we're gonna keep getting complaints, but I don't know what else, more we can do to avoid this, right? I think we're doing as much as we can. Even the private road, 217th and Fenway on the north side, they've added additional signage. So I think people are gonna try to find their ways, but it's just gonna be a headache, and unfortunately, I don't know what, you can't close the road off because you have people living down those streets. So I guess just to say it's not for a lack of effort by everyone involved to try to get people to take the detours and take, the approved routes, but, it's gonna be a struggle, and it's gonna be all this year and next year too. So It's just gonna be what we're gonna deal with and forward on the complaints, and MinDOT, like I said, has been really helpful in adding signage wherever we say, can you add more, they've been adding it, so, it's been helpful.
Well, I appreciate all that coordination and to MinDOT and especially the city of Columbus for getting involved. That's very neighborly of them, so.
Yep.
Right. Mark?
Just a couple updates. We did interview some finance director candidates, and we're going to be following up with some of those folks. We may ask back for a second interview. Reached out to Councilmember Erickson to give us a hand with those second interviews, and we also received word from the city of Hugo that they're offering their finance director to come and sit in on the interview panel as well. So hopefully we can narrow that candidate pool down and see if we have a viable candidate there for us. And then just wanted everyone to give an update that Dave and I have been working with our architects and builder on the Public Works building plans, and we'll be having some information for that at the next city council meeting for review by the council, and kind of to wrap up that first stage of the project and look at the next steps. So that's all I have.
Great. Councilmember Miller?
Nothing for me tonight, thanks.
Councilmember Erickson?
Nothing tonight?
Councilmember Larson?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Okay, I don't have anything else. Thank you, everyone, for a great meeting, and with no other business coming forward, the meeting's adjourned.